My name is Vivian. I'm 30 years old and I live in the city. On a random Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed at exactly 3:47 p.m. I was in the middle of a budget meeting with my finance team, reviewing quarterly projections, when the screen lit up. I glanced down and saw a name I hadn't seen in 8 months. My father. My stomach twisted. For a second, I just stared at it. The message was short and direct. Family celebration tonight. Important news about the expansion. Don't be late. I read it twice, then a third time. For the last 8 months, my phone had been completely silent when it came to my family. No birthday calls, no texts asking how I was doing, no invitations to Thanksgiving or Christmas. As far as they were concerned, I didn't exist. I had become a ghost in my own family. But this morning, everything changed. At 8 o'clock, Forbes released their newest issue. My face was right there in the business section, staring back at me from newsstands across the country. Next to my picture was a headline about my tech company and one very specific number, $92 million. That was the valuation my company had just received. It wasn't a coincidence. They didn't suddenly miss me. They didn't suddenly remember. They had a daughter named Vivian. They saw the article. They saw the money. And just like that, I was worth their time again. I used to cry when they ignored me. I used to beg for just a little bit of their attention, just a crumb of their approval. But sitting there, staring at that text message in the middle of my meeting, I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel angry. I felt cold, ice cold. They thought they were inviting their quiet, desperate daughter to dinner, the one who would be grateful just to be included. But they were wrong. They weren't inviting their daughter. They were inviting a bank account, and they had no idea that this bank was about to close its doors forever. My name is Vivian. I'm 30 years old. And to understand why I felt so cold when I read my father's text message, you have to understand the night of the rain. You have to understand the night I finally thought I had made it, the night I believed everything would change. It was 2 years ago. It was the night of my Series B funding announcement. In the startup world, this is more than just a milestone. It's massive. It means serious investors believe in you. It means you're not just a dreamer with a laptop anymore. You're a real player in the game. You've arrived. I had secured $20 million in funding. $20 million. Let that sink in. It was the hardest thing I had ever done in my entire life. I had worked 18-hour days for months on end. I had eaten cheap ramen noodles for dinner and slept on the office floor when I was too tired to drive home. I had pitched to room after room of men in expensive suits who looked at me like I was a little girl who had wandered into a library by mistake. Men who talked over me. Men who questioned my numbers even though my numbers were perfect. But I did it. I won. I proved them all wrong. I wanted to celebrate, but I didn't want to party with strangers or business associates. I wanted the people who were supposed to love me. I wanted my family to see what I had accomplished. I wanted them to be proud of me, just once. I booked a private room at Le Jardin, the most expensive restaurant in the entire city. It was the kind of place my parents loved to brag about. The kind of place with white linen tablecloths that felt like silk under your fingertips, crystal glasses that caught the light like diamonds, and waiters who wore actual tuxedos and spoke in hushed, respectful tones. It was fancy. It was expensive. It was perfect. I ordered the best wine on the menu, a bottle that cost more than my first month's rent when I started my company. I ordered the seafood tower my mother always raved about, the one with the lobster and oysters stacked high on ice. I ordered the dry-aged steak my father always talked about when he wanted to impress people at parties. I sat there at 7 o'clock sharp, wearing a new dress. It was blue, a deep ocean blue. I remember the color because I spent an entire hour in the dressing room choosing it. I tried on 7 different dresses. I wanted to look successful. I wanted to look like someone they could be proud of. I wanted them to look at me and say, "Good job, Vivian. We're proud of you. You did it." At 7:15, the room was still empty. Just me and 6 chairs arranged around a beautiful table. I checked my phone. No texts, no missed calls, nothing. I told the waiter, trying to sound casual and unbothered. They're just running a little late. Traffic is always bad on Tuesdays, you know. The waiter nodded. He was kind. He had gentle eyes that looked sorry for me even though he didn't say it. He poured me a glass of water and adjusted the flower arrangement in the center of the table. At 7:45, the ice on the seafood tower was starting to melt. Little pools of water were forming on the silver platter. I texted my mother, keeping my message light and breezy. "Hey Mom, everything okay? I'm at the restaurant." She didn't reply immediately. I looked around the empty room. There were 6 chairs, one for me, one for Mom, one for Dad, one for my older brother Jason, one for my younger brother Tyler, and one for Uncle Jeffrey, who always tagged along if there was free food and an open bar. 5 empty chairs. They looked like missing teeth in a smile. They looked like they were laughing at me. At 8 o'clock, my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from Jason. "Can't make it, Viv. Something came up with the kids. Have a drink for me." I stared at the message. I knew Jason didn't have the kids that night. It was his ex-wife's weekend. I had listened to him complain about the custody schedule just last month. He was lying. He was lying. And he didn't even care that I knew it. But I didn't say anything. I didn't call him out. I just typed back, "Okay, next time." There wouldn't be a next time. I already knew that. But I typed it anyway because that's what you do. You pretend. You play along. 10 minutes later, Mom finally replied, "Oh, honey, I have such a terrible migraine. I can't even move my head. I'm so sorry. Take pictures of the food for me." I stared at the screen. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I knew I shouldn't do it, but I did it anyway. I opened Instagram. I clicked on my cousin's story. There was a video posted 5 minutes ago. I could hear loud music in the background, people laughing and shouting. And there, right there in the background, clear as day, was my mother. She was holding a martini glass. She was wearing a silver dress that sparkled under the lights. She was laughing, throwing her head back like she didn't have a care in the world. She didn't look like she had a migraine. She looked perfectly fine. She looked happy. She was at Tyler's influencer launch party. Tyler, my younger brother, the golden child who could do no wrong. He had decided last week that he was going to be a lifestyle influencer. He had no job. He had no plan. He had no content strategy. But he had a party. And somehow, that party was more important than my $20 million achievement. My parents chose his party over my success. They chose his empty dream over my reality. My father didn't even bother to text. He just didn't show up. He didn't think I was worth a 30-second message. I sat in that beautiful, expensive room for another hour. The waiter came back several times. He kept refilling my water glass, even though I hadn't touched it. Finally, he cleared his throat softly and asked, "Would you like to order dinner, ma'am?" I looked at the 5 empty chairs. I looked at the seafood tower that was now sitting in a pool of melted ice. I looked at the bottle of wine I had ordered to celebrate with people who didn't come. "No," I said. My voice sounded small and far away, like it was coming from someone else. "Just the check, please." The waiter nodded. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The pity in his eyes said everything. I paid the bill. $400 for food nobody ate. $400 for a celebration that never happened. I signed the receipt with a shaking hand, added a generous tip because it wasn't the waiter's fault my family didn't love me, and I walked out. It was raining outside. Of course it was raining. The universe has a cruel sense of timing like that. I stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant and let the water ruin my hair. I let it ruin the blue dress I had spent an hour choosing. I let the rain soak through my clothes until I was shivering. I cried, but I didn't make a sound. I had learned a long time ago how to cry silently. I just let the tears mix with the rain so nobody walking past could tell the difference. So nobody would know that the woman standing on the sidewalk in the expensive blue dress was completely and utterly broken. That wasn't the first time they had disappointed me. It wasn't even close. But it was the time that broke me. It was the moment when something inside me finally snapped. The pattern had been there my whole life, written in invisible ink across every birthday, every school event, every accomplishment I thought might finally make them see me. When I was 10 years old, I won the state science fair. I had worked on my project for months. I built a working model of a water filtration system using recycled materials and basic chemistry. It actually worked. You could pour dirty water in one end, and clean water came out the other. I was so proud. I felt like a real scientist. The award ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon. I told my parents about it weeks in advance. I reminded them every day for a week. I wrote it on the kitchen calendar in big red letters. "We can't go, Vivian," my dad had said without even looking up from his newspaper. "Tyler has his soccer game." "But Tyler plays soccer every weekend," I said. My voice was small and desperate. "This is the state finals. I might win." "Don't be selfish," my mother snapped. She was putting on her makeup in the hallway mirror. "Your brother needs our support. He's the team captain. This is important." "But my science fair is—" "We'll see you when we get back," Dad interrupted. "I'm sure you'll do fine. You always do." They went to the soccer game. Tyler's team lost by 6 points. Tyler cried in the car. They bought him ice cream to make him feel better. They told him he was still a champion. I stood on the stage alone to accept my first place medal. The principal looked out into the crowd searching for my parents. I saw him looking. I saw the exact moment he realized no one was there for me. I saw the pity flash across his face. It was the same pity I would see in the waiter's eyes years later. I smiled anyway. I smiled so hard my face hurt. I took the medal and put it in my pocket. I never showed it to them. They never asked. When I graduated college with honors, they left the ceremony early because Uncle Jeffrey was bored and wanted to beat the traffic. I watched them stand up and walk out during the middle of the dean's speech, right before they called my name. I walked across that stage and shook the dean's hand while my parents were already in the parking lot. When I started my first company, scraping together every penny I had, I asked my dad for a small loan. Just $5,000 to buy a decent server. That was all I needed to get started. "Vivian," he sighed, like I was asking for the moon and the stars. "Business is risky, especially tech stuff. You're a girl. You should focus on finding a nice husband instead of playing entrepreneur. I can't throw money away on a hobby." 2 weeks later, he bought Jason a brand new truck, $40,000, midnight blue with leather seats and a premium sound system. Jason crashed it into a telephone pole a month later while driving drunk. Dad just laughed when he heard and said, "Boys will be boys. At least he's okay." They didn't hate me. I think hate would have been easier. If they hated me, it would mean I mattered enough to cause an emotion. No, they just didn't care. I was the furniture. I was background noise. I was safe, reliable Vivian who never caused trouble, who never needed anything, who never made a scene. They punished me for being independent. Because I didn't need their help, because I didn't crash cars or drop out of college or throw tantrums. I didn't get their attention. Tyler and Jason were disasters who needed constant rescuing, constant bailing out, constant attention. So they got all the love, all the concern, all the focus. And I got nothing. So when I saw that text message today, 8 months after they cut me off completely for some imagined slight, I still don't understand. I didn't feel hope. I remembered the rain. I remembered the empty chairs at Le Jardin. I remembered the science fair. I remembered the check for the truck. I remembered all of it. I realized that they weren't calling because they missed their daughter. They were calling because the hobby they had laughed at was now worth $92 million. They were calling because they were hungry, and they thought I was the meal. I stood in front of my closet mirror in my apartment, trying to decide what to wear to this family dinner. My closet is full of beautiful clothes now. I have tailored suits from designers whose names I couldn't pronounce 5 years ago. I have silk blouses that cost more than my first car. I have shoes with red soles that make a clicking sound when I walk, the sound of success. I could dress like the CEO I am. I could walk in there dripping in diamonds and designer labels and show them exactly how rich I had become. I could make them choke on their jealousy. I reached for a red designer dress. The fabric felt like liquid in my hands. It screamed power and money and success. It would make a statement. Then I stopped. No. If I walked in looking like money, they would be on guard. They would see a shark. They would see someone who couldn't be manipulated. I needed them to see a mouse. I needed them to think nothing had changed. I needed them to feel superior, comfortable, in control. Because when people feel superior, they get sloppy. They say things they shouldn't say. They reveal their true faces. They show you who they really are. I put the red dress back. I pulled out a pair of plain black trousers and a simple gray sweater. It was clean, but old. There was a tiny loose thread on the sleeve that I didn't bother to fix. I wore comfortable flats, not heels. I tied my hair back in a messy bun. I wore no makeup except a little lip balm. I looked in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked plain. I looked exactly like the Vivian they remembered. The struggling Vivian, the boring Vivian, the Vivian who would be grateful just to be invited. Perfect, I whispered to my reflection. I went down to the garage under my building. Parked in my assigned spot was my new car, a sleek black electric sports car that goes from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. It's fast and silent and beautiful. It cost more than my parents' house. Next to it was my old car, a 2016 sedan. The paint was fading on the hood. The bumper had a dent from when a shopping cart hit it 3 years ago. I had kept it for messy errands, for hauling boxes, for days when I didn't want to be noticed. I grabbed the keys to the sedan. The engine coughed when I started it. The air conditioning rattled like it had something loose inside. The smell of old coffee and dust filled the cabin. It was the smell of my past, of the person I used to be. I drove out into the city as the sun was starting to set. The drive to the Oak Haven Country Club took 40 minutes through rush hour traffic. As I drove, I could feel the old anxiety trying to come back, trying to crawl under my skin like it always did when I had to see my family. It's a physical thing, anxiety. My stomach started to knot. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tight, making my knuckles white. My brain started playing the old tapes, the old recordings of their voices. "You're too sensitive, Vivian. Why can't you be more fun like Tyler? You always ruin the mood with your seriousness. Can't you just be normal for once?" I took a deep breath. I focused on the road. I talked to myself out loud in the empty car. I am not that person anymore. I am the CEO of a major tech company. I manage 200 employees. I make decisions that move millions of dollars every single day. I have fired people scarier than my father. I have negotiated with people smarter than my mother. They don't know who I am now. They only know a memory of me, and memories can't hurt you. I pulled up to the gate of the country club. The security guard looked at my dented car with immediate suspicion and barely concealed contempt. He leaned out of his booth, looking annoyed. "Delivery is at the back entrance," he said rudely, not even trying to hide his judgment. I rolled down my window. I didn't smile. I kept my voice flat and neutral. "I'm here for the Miller dinner. My name is Vivian Miller." He checked his clipboard with a frown, dragging his finger down the list. He looked at my car again, then back at the list, like he couldn't believe someone driving a piece of junk like this was on the guest list. "Right, go ahead." He waved me through without another word, looking bored and dismissive. He didn't respect me. That was good. That was perfect. That was part of the plan. I drove up the long, winding driveway. The landscaping was perfect in that artificial way. The grass was cut to the exact same height everywhere. The flowers were arranged in precise geometric circles. There wasn't a single leaf out of place, not a single weed. It was all surface. It was all fake, just like my family. I parked the sedan right in the front row, in the spot closest to the entrance. Next to me was my father's Range Rover, polished and shiny like a black mirror. On the other side was Jason's Porsche, silver and aggressive and expensive. I knew for a fact Jason couldn't afford the payments on that Porsche. His divorce had cleaned him out. Dad was probably paying for it, just like he paid for everything Jason wanted. My dirty, dented sedan looked like a stain between their luxury cars. It looked pathetic and out of place. Perfect. I turned off the engine. I sat in the silence for a moment, preparing myself. This was the lion's den. I was walking back into the place where I had been hurt the most, the place that had made me feel small and worthless for 30 years. I looked at my phone one last time. I had a text from Alina, my CFO, my chief financial officer, and the smartest person I've ever worked with. Documents are ready. I'm on standby. Just say the word. I texted back. Give me 30 minutes. I put the phone in my pocket. I checked my face in the rearview mirror one last time. I made sure my expression was neutral. No anger, no excitement, no emotion at all. Just a blank page they could write whatever story they wanted on. I opened the car door. The air outside smelled of fresh-cut grass and expensive perfume and old money. I walked up the stone steps to the heavy wooden doors of the club. My heart was beating slow and steady. Thump, thump, thump. I wasn't walking in to beg for love. I wasn't walking in to show off. I was walking in to close a deal. This was business. I pushed the doors open and walked into the private dining room. It was called the Gold Room. The walls were covered in dark wood paneling. There was a chandelier hanging from the ceiling that looked like a frozen explosion of glass and crystal. In the center was a round table set for 6, covered in white linen and gleaming silverware. This time, there were no empty chairs. Everyone was there. Everyone had shown up. My father sat at what he considered the head of the round table, even though round tables don't have heads. He was wearing his navy suit, the one he wore when he wanted to intimidate people. My mother was next to him, wearing a dress that glittered under the chandelier lights. My brothers Jason and Tyler were across from them. Uncle Jeffrey was already there, nursing a scotch and looking red-faced and bored. As soon as I stepped onto the carpet, the performance began. "There she is!" my mother shrieked. It was a high-pitched, theatrical sound that didn't match any emotion I had ever heard from her before. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She rushed over to me like I was a soldier returning from war. Before I could even say hello, she wrapped her arms around me. She smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray and desperation. Her hug was tight, almost suffocating. It was a hug for an audience, not for a daughter. It was a hug that said, "Look how much I love my daughter." Not, "I actually love my daughter." She held me for 3 seconds too long. I counted. "We missed you so much, Vivi," she said, pulling back to look at me with tears in her eyes that I knew were fake. She used the nickname Vivi. She hadn't called me that since I was 6 years old. Usually it was just Vivian, or hey, or nothing at all. "Hi, Mom," I said. My voice was calm and flat. I didn't hug her back. I just let my arms hang by my sides like dead weight. She didn't notice, or she didn't care. She guided me to the table like I was a prize she was showing off at a fair, her hand on my elbow like she was afraid I might run away. "Look who made time for us," my father boomed in his fake, cheerful voice. He stood up and extended his hand across the table. My father is a big man. He likes to squeeze your hand until it hurts to show he's the alpha, to remind you he's in charge. I took his hand. His grip was hard, crushing. I squeezed back just as hard, meeting his strength with my own. He looked surprised for a fraction of a second, his eyes widening just a little, but then he covered it with a loud laugh. "Sit, sit," he said, gesturing grandly to an empty chair. "We ordered the champagne already. Dom Perignon. Only the best for tonight." I sat down between Jason and Uncle Jeffrey. Jason looked at me with bloodshot eyes. He had bags under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. His suit looked expensive, but his tie was crooked and there was a stain on his collar. "Hey, sis," he said with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Nice sweater. Did you get that at Target?" "Jason!" Mom scolded him, but she was smiling. "Don't tease your sister. She's being thrifty. That's how rich people stay rich, right, Vivian?" "Something like that," I said. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap like this was a normal family dinner. The waiter arrived with the champagne. He popped the cork with a soft thump that echoed in the quiet room. He poured the golden liquid into tall flutes, filling each one with practiced precision. My father raised his glass high. "To family," he said, looking around the table with a fake warm smile. "And to success." "To family," everyone echoed like a rehearsed chorus. I lifted my glass, but I didn't drink. I just watched them. I watched them drink greedily, like the champagne was water, and they had been lost in the desert. "So," Tyler said, looking at his phone instead of at me, scrolling through TikTok like we weren't in the middle of a family dinner. He didn't even look up. I saw the article, 92 million, that's crazy. "It's a valuation, Tyler," I said quietly, keeping my voice even. "It's not cash in the bank. It means investors think the company is worth that much based on our growth and potential." "Still," my father said, waving his hand dismissively like the details didn't matter. "It's impressive. Who would have thought? Our quiet little Vivian running a tech empire." "It's a logistics platform, Dad," I corrected him. "Not an empire. We optimize supply chains for global shipping using AI and predictive analytics." "Right, right," he said, clearly not listening to a word I was saying. "Computer stuff, very smart. I always knew she had it in her." I almost laughed out loud. He always knew? He told me to find a husband instead of starting a business. Uncle Jeffrey slurped his drink loudly. "I told you, didn't I, Bob? I said that girl is a grinder. She's got the Miller work ethic." I did laugh then, just a little. Uncle Jeffrey hadn't worked a real day in 20 years. He lived off a trust fund my grandfather set up before he died. The Miller work ethic he was talking about didn't exist. My father had inherited his business from his father. Jason had been given a job he wasn't qualified for. Tyler didn't work at all. I was the only one who had built something from zero. But tonight, they were rewriting history. Tonight, my success was suddenly a Miller trait, something in the blood. "We're just so proud," Mom said. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her hand was cold, and her rings dug into my skin. "I was telling the girls at the club today. My Vivian is in Forbes. They were so jealous." That was it. That was the currency. She didn't care about my hard work or my company or the fact that I had changed an entire industry. She cared that she could brag to her friends. I was an accessory to her social life, like a new handbag or a piece of jewelry. "So, Jason," I said, leaning in slightly, "how does it feel to be in the same room as the rich one?" "I don't feel any different," I lied smoothly. "Come on," Jason laughed, but it sounded forced. "You must have bought something cool. A boat? A house in the Hamptons? A private jet?" "No," I said simply. "I reinvested most of the capital back into the company. We're hiring 50 new engineers next month. We're expanding to 3 new markets." The table went silent for a moment. The excitement drained from their faces. They looked disappointed, almost offended. They wanted to hear about yachts and Ferraris and private islands. They wanted to hear about spending money, burning through it, showing it off. That's what they understood. They didn't understand building. They didn't understand investing in the future. "Well," Dad cleared his throat and took a long sip of champagne. "That's very responsible. Boring, but responsible." The appetizers arrived. Shrimp cocktail with cocktail sauce that looked like blood, oysters on ice that smelled like the ocean, tuna tartare arranged in a perfect circle. It was a feast, the kind of meal that costs more than most people make in a week. "Eat up," Dad said loudly, making sure the waiter could hear him. "It's on me tonight. My treat." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like buying dinner was some grand gesture of love. as if spending $200 on a meal erased 30 years of neglect. As we ate, they talked about themselves. They talked and talked and talked, and I just listened. I took mental notes. Tyler talked about his brand. He said he had 50,000 followers now. Like that was some great achievement. He complained that the algorithm was shadow banning him, that he wasn't getting the engagement he deserved. "You should let me promote your app," Tyler said, chewing with his mouth open. "I could get you like so many downloads. We could do a collab, family discount, obviously." "My app is for commercial freight shipping, Tyler," I said calmly. "It's B2B software. I don't think your followers are looking to move 20 tons of steel across the Pacific Ocean." Tyler rolled his eyes. "You're so literal, Viv. It's about vibes. It's about brand awareness." Jason talked about the stress at the office. He worked for Dad's motel company, in a position he got because of his last name, not his qualifications. "The unions are a nightmare," Jason grumbled, stabbing his steak. "They want everything, breaks, overtime, benefits. It's impossible to make a profit." I knew for a fact Jason usually left the office at 2 in the afternoon to play golf. I had seen his Instagram stories. Mom talked about the renovations on the lake house. She was upset because the Italian marble tile she ordered was the wrong shade of white. "It was eggshell, Vivian," she said, looking at me with wide, tragic eyes like I was supposed to understand the depth of this catastrophe. "And I specifically asked for ivory. Can you imagine?" "That sounds terrible," I said, keeping my face completely flat. "It is," she sighed dramatically. "Nobody is competent anymore. Nobody takes pride in their work." I cut into my steak. It was perfectly cooked, medium rare, just like I liked it, but it tasted like cardboard. Everything tasted like nothing. They were treating me like an old friend they had run into by chance. They were laughing, including me in the jokes, pouring more wine into my glass even though I wasn't drinking. If a stranger walked by and looked at our table, they would see a happy, wealthy family enjoying a Tuesday dinner together. But I saw the cracks. I saw the way Dad checked his watch every 5 minutes. I saw the way Mom's smile vanished instantly when she thought no one was looking. I saw the way Jason kept tapping his foot nervously under the table, like he was anxious about something. They were buttering me up. They were softening the target. They were being nice, but it was an effort. It was like watching bad actors trying to remember their lines in a play they hadn't rehearsed enough. They were rushing through the small talk. They wanted to get to the real reason they had invited me here. I decided to help them along. I wanted to see the pitch. I wanted to see exactly how much they thought I was worth, how much they thought they could squeeze out of me. I put my fork down carefully. I wiped my mouth with the napkin. I looked directly at my father. "So," I said, my voice cutting through their chatter like a knife, "the text said you had important news about an expansion." The air in the room changed instantly. The laughter stopped. The chewing stopped. The sound of silverware on plates went silent. Dad straightened his tie. He sat up taller in his chair. He exchanged a quick look with Mom. It was a rehearsed look. It said, "It's showtime." "Yes," Dad said. His voice dropped an octave. It became his businessman voice, the one he used when he wanted people to take him seriously. "I'm glad you brought that up, Vivian." He signaled the waiter to clear the plates. The waiter moved quickly and efficiently, and within minutes, the table was clean. "We have an exciting opportunity," Dad began. "Something that is going to change the trajectory of this family forever." I leaned back in my chair. I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." The waiter closed the heavy door, leaving us alone in the silence of the gold room. My father reached down beside his chair and pulled up a black leather briefcase. He set it on the table with a heavy thud that echoed in the quiet. He clicked the latches open. Snap, snap. He pulled out a thick, glossy folder that looked like it had been professionally printed. He slid it across the white tablecloth toward me. The cover had a picture of a shining futuristic building that looked like a palace made of glass and cedar. Palm trees were photoshopped around it, looking fake and too green. In gold letters at the bottom it read, "The Miller Resort and Spa, a new era." "Open it," Dad urged, pushing it closer to me. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were architectural renderings that looked expensive, pie charts with numbers that didn't quite add up, and paragraphs full of business buzzwords like luxury experience, exclusive clientele, and vertical integration synergy. You know the motel chain has been the backbone of this family for 40 years, Dad said, clasping his hands on the table like he was about to deliver a sermon. Your grandfather built the first one, I built the next 5. But the market is changing, Vivian. People don't want motels anymore. They want experiences. He pointed a thick finger at the drawing of the glass palace. This is the future, he said with conviction. We're going to take the flagship property off the highway, the old Miller Inn, and we're going to bulldoze it. We're going to build a 5-star wellness retreat, spa treatments, organic farm-to-table dining, yoga studios, meditation gardens, $400 a night minimum. It's going to be gorgeous, Mom added, her eyes shining with fake excitement. We're going to have a meditation garden with a koi pond. I'm designing it myself. It's a guaranteed win, Jason jumped in. We've done the market research. The demographics are perfect. The location is ideal. I looked at the papers. I didn't look at the pretty pictures. I looked at the numbers in the corners, the fine print they hoped I wouldn't read. This is a massive project, I said calmly. Construction alone looks like 15 million? 18, Dad corrected quickly. To do it right. We're not cutting corners. And you have the financing? I asked, keeping my voice neutral and curious. Dad cleared his throat. He took a long sip of water. This was the pivot point. This was where the truth lived. We have the primary investors lined up, he said smoothly, like he had practiced this part. The bank is on board for the construction loan. But you know how banks are. They're bureaucratic, they're slow. They want to see a certain amount of liquid capital up front before they release the big funds. A bridge, so to speak. He paused. He looked at me with what he thought was a warm, fatherly expression. To me, he looked like a wolf deciding which part of the sheep to bite first. We realized, he continued, that we shouldn't be giving all this interest money to strangers. We should keep it in the family. So we want to offer you the chance to be a part of this. A part of it? I asked. We need a bridge loan, Jason said, cutting to the chase like he always did when he was impatient. To clear the old liens and break ground. How much? I asked. Dad locked eyes with me. $1.5 million. $1.5 million. The room was deadly silent. They were all watching me like I was a slot machine that might pay out. Mom was twisting her wedding ring around and around her finger. Tyler had finally put down his phone. Uncle Jeffrey had stopped drinking. 1.5 million, I repeated slowly, letting the number hang in the air. It's a loan, Dad said quickly, his words tumbling out. With interest. We'll pay you back in, let's say, 2 years, 6% interest. That's better than you'll get in any savings account. It's an investment in your legacy, Vivi, Mom said softly, reaching for my hand again. This resort, it's going to be something we leave to our grandchildren. Don't you want to be part of building that? Don't you want to be part of something bigger than yourself? And frankly, Uncle Jeffrey mumbled into his scotch glass, it's the right thing to do. Family supports family. They supported you when you were starting out. Now that you've made it big, it's time to give back. I felt a sharp spike of anger shoot through my chest like electricity, but I pushed it down. I kept my face neutral. The family supported me? I thought about the time I asked for $5,000, and Dad told me to find a husband instead. I thought about the ramen noodles I ate for 6 months straight. I thought about sleeping on my office floor. I thought about the silence. You said the bank is on board, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I turned a page in the folder. You said First National. Absolutely, Dad said, nodding vigorously. They love the project. They just need us to show some skin in the game. That's standard in commercial development. Which bank specifically? I asked. Dad blinked. First National. We've been with them for decades. And they're okay with the current occupancy rates? I asked casually. Jason shifted in his seat. I could feel his discomfort. Occupancy it's seasonal. It's a little down right now, but that's exactly why we're pivoting. The motel model is dying. Right, I said. So you need 1.5 million to demolish the old building and start fresh. Exactly, Dad smiled. He thought he had me. He thought I was the naive daughter who just wanted to please Daddy, who would write a check just to earn his approval. It's a no-brainer, Vivian, he continued. And look, we could go to outside investors. We have people practically begging to get in on this. But Mom and I discussed it, and we said no. Let's give Vivian the first right of refusal. We wanted to honor you. Honor me, I said flatly. Yes, Mom said, squeezing my hand. We're so proud of you, and this way we can all be partners. A true family business. They were leaning in now, all of them, the predators smelling blood. 1.5, I said again. And you need it when? By the end of the month, Dad said, to keep the construction schedule on track. That's very soon, I said. Business moves fast, Vivian, Dad said condescendingly, like he was teaching me something I didn't know. You know that. You have to be decisive in business. I am decisive, I said. I closed the glossy folder slowly. I placed my hands flat on top of it. I have a few questions first. Of course. Dad waved his hand magnanimously. Ask anything. We're an open book. You said the bank is First National, I said. And you said occupancy is just a little down. And you said the business has been the backbone of the family. Yes, yes, and yes, Dad said, smiling like this was going exactly according to plan. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a thin gray tablet. I turned it on. The screen glowed blue in the dim room, casting shadows on their faces. That's funny, I said, tapping the screen and pulling up a document. Because I did a little research before I came here today. Public records are fascinating things, aren't they? Dad's smile faltered just a little. What do you mean? He asked. Well, I said, scrolling through the document slowly. According to the county clerk's office, First National didn't approve a construction loan. Actually, they filed a notice of default against the Miller Inn 3 months ago. The silence that followed was not the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a bomb that had just landed on the table, but hadn't exploded yet. That's a misunderstanding, Dad stammered. His face started to turn red. Paperwork error. We're sorting it out with the bank. And, I continued, my voice steady and cold, occupancy isn't seasonal. It's been under 40% for 2 years straight. You're not pivoting because you have a vision, Dad. You're pivoting because you're bleeding cash. I looked up from the tablet. I looked directly into his eyes. You don't need 1.5 million for a bridge loan. You need 1.5 million to stop the bank from seizing the property next month. You're insolvent. Mom gasped like I had slapped her. Vivian, how dare you use that word? It's the truth, Mom, I said. The business isn't a gold mine. It's a sinking ship. And you invited me here tonight because you want me to pay for the lifeboats. Dad slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. The wine glasses shook. That is enough, he shouted. The fake warmth was completely gone. The mask had fallen off. Who the hell do you think you are? Coming in here investigating your own family. We're offering you an opportunity. You're offering me a lie, I said. We raised you, he yelled, standing up now. His face was purple. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I said. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking a little, but my voice was rock solid. You ignored me for 8 months. You missed my funding announcement. You missed my life. But the second you saw a dollar sign next to my name, you suddenly remembered I existed. You selfish little... Jason started to stand up. Sit down, Jason, I said sharply. The command in my voice was so strong that he actually sat back down looking shocked. I'm not done, I said. I looked at all of them. The fear was starting to replace the anger in their eyes. They realized I knew. They realized the game was up. You wanted to talk business? I asked. Okay, let's talk real business. Not this fantasy resort nonsense. I tapped my earpiece. Alina, I said into the microphone, come in. The heavy doors of the gold room opened again. My CFO, Alina, walked in. She was wearing a sharp gray suit that probably cost more than everything my mother was wearing combined. She was carrying a thick stack of legal documents. She looked like an executioner. She walked to the table and stood next to me. She didn't look at my family. She didn't acknowledge them at all. She placed the documents in front of me. Everything is prepared, Vivian, she said. I looked at my father. He was pale. He was sweating. His hands were shaking. I didn't come here to give you a loan, Dad, I said. I don't lend money to failing businesses. It's a bad investment. Then why are you here? Mom cried. Her voice was trembling. Why did you come? I placed my hand on the stack of papers. I'm here to make a purchase. The room was quiet, but it was a heavy kind of quiet. It was the sound of a held breath, of a world about to end. My father was staring at the stack of papers under my hand like they might explode. In a way, they were about to. Alina stood beside me, silent and professional. She was my witness. She was my shield. She hadn't flinched once through the entire meal, through all their fake pleasantries and their desperate pitch. I opened the folder she'd given me. It wasn't glossy or colorful like my father's brochure. It didn't have pictures of palm trees or smiling yoga instructors. It was black and white. It was rows of numbers, tax liens, court filings, default notices. It was the autopsy of the Miller family business. You said the business is the backbone of this family, I said, my voice steady. I picked up the first sheet of paper. But a backbone is supposed to hold you up. This business is dragging you down into the mud. You don't know what you're talking about, Jason snapped. He was trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked. You look at spreadsheets all day in your fancy office. You don't know the reality of operations. You don't know what it's like in the trenches. I know that you haven't paid your property taxes in 14 months, I said calmly. I slid the tax document across the table. It stopped right in front of Jason's plate. The county has already placed a lien on the land. That's public record, Jason. Operations don't matter if you don't own the dirt you're standing on. Jason looked down at the paper. He didn't touch it. He looked like it might burn him. Cash flow is tight, Dad grunted. He waved his hand dismissively. It's a temporary dip. The economy is soft. Once we get the bridge loan, we'll clear the taxes first thing. It's standard practice. Is it standard practice to borrow money from a hard money lender at 18% interest? I asked. I pulled out the next document. You took out a second mortgage 3 years ago. Not from First National, from a private equity group in Chicago known for predatory lending. You used the equity in the land to pay for... I pretended to scan the page, even though I had memorized every line. Yes, executive bonuses and fleet vehicle upgrades. I looked at Jason's Porsche key fob sitting on the table. I looked at the diamond bracelet on my mother's wrist that probably cost $50,000. You stripped the equity out of the company to buy cars and jewelry, I said. And now that the balloon payment is due, you don't have the cash. We deserve those bonuses, Mom cried out. She looked genuinely offended. Your father works harder than anyone I know. He built this empire from nothing. He deserves to drive a nice car. Do you expect us to live like poor people? I expect you to pay your debts, I said. That's what you taught me, isn't it? A Miller always pays his way. That's what you said when I needed braces. And you told me to get a paper route to pay for half of them. I was 12 years old. Mom flinched. She looked away. That was to teach you character, Dad said stiffly. Well, it worked, I said. I have character. And I also have solvency. You have neither. I continued the demolition. It felt surgical. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't crying. I was just reading the facts, laying them out one by one like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Occupancy isn't just down, Dad. It's dropped 40% year over year. The reviews online are terrible. Bed bugs in room 204. Black mold in the shower in room 112. No hot water in the entire East Wing for 3 weeks last winter. Customers complain about everything these days, Uncle Jeffrey shouted. He slammed his scotch glass down. They're entitled. They expect five-star service for motel prices. You can't please everyone. You need $3 million in repairs just to bring the building up to code, I said. The roof is leaking in 5 places. The HVAC system is from 1985. The foundation in the north section is cracking. If a city inspector came by tomorrow, they would condemn the building. They would put a padlock on the doors and kick everyone out. I looked at my father. He was shrinking in his chair. He was usually such a big man, filling every room with his loud voice and his broad shoulders. Now he looked old. He looked tired. He looked small. You lied to me, I said quietly. You invited me here. You gave me champagne. You showed me drawings of a resort that will never exist. You told me you needed $1.5 million for an opportunity. But that money wouldn't build a resort. It would just pay off the sharks in Chicago for another 6 months. It would buy you a little more time to pretend you're rich. We are rich, Tyler yelled. He stood up, knocking his chair over backward with a loud crash. We're the Millers. We own half this town. You own nothing, Tyler, I said calmly, not even looking at him. The bank owns the house. The lender in Chicago owns the motel. And the credit card companies own everything else. I looked at the glossy resort folder he had given me. This, I said, tapping it with one finger, is a fantasy. It's a sinking ship painted gold, and you wanted me to come on board and chain myself to the deck while you jumped into the lifeboats. It's not a sinking ship, Dad roared. He couldn't take it anymore. The truth was hurting him too much. It's a rough patch. Every business has them. You think you're so smart with your app and your venture capital and your Forbes article? You got lucky. You don't know what it's like to grind for 40 years. I know exactly what it's like, I said. I know because I watched you. I watched you neglect the business while you played golf 4 days a week. I watched you promote Jason over competent managers just because he has your last name. I watched you ignore market changes because you were too arrogant to learn new things. I leaned forward across the table. The numbers don't lie, Dad. You're insolvent. You've been insolvent for 18 months. You've been robbing Peter to pay Paul, and now Paul is at the door with a sledgehammer. Dad's face was purple. He was breathing hard. His chest was heaving. So that's it? He spat. You come here, you humiliate us, you wave your papers around, you think you're better than us? I don't think I'm better, I said. I think I'm honest. And I think I'm the only one at this table who actually knows how to run a business. Then help us, Mom pleaded. Her strategy shifted instantly from anger to begging. She reached for my hand again, but I pulled it away before she could touch me. Vivian, please. If we don't get this money, we'll lose everything. The house, the club membership, the cars will be nothing. You won't be nothing, Mom, I said. You'll just be normal, like everyone else, like the people you look down on. I can't be normal, she sobbed. Real tears were running down her face now, ruining her makeup. I can't. What will people say? The scandal. Vivian, you can't let this happen. You have $92 million. This is pocket change to you. Just write the check, please, for your mother. I looked at her. I saw the tears. They were real tears, but they weren't for me. She wasn't crying because she had hurt me. She wasn't crying because she had missed my life or ignored my achievements or chosen Tyler's party over my celebration. She was crying because she was afraid of losing her status. She was crying for her country club membership. The $92 million isn't cash, Mom, I said. I told you. It's a valuation. And even if it was cash sitting in a bank account, why would I invest in a bad deal? Because we're family, she screamed. The word echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Family. It was the word they always used as a weapon. When they wanted something, they were family. When I needed something, I was a stranger. I looked at the stack of papers one last time, at all the evidence of their greed and their incompetence and their lies. That's the problem, I said softly. You think family means you're entitled to my work. You think it means you can treat me like dirt for 30 years and then cash me in like a lottery ticket when it's convenient. I closed the folder with a soft thud. I'm done with the pitch, I said. My refusal hit the room like a physical blow. For a few seconds, nobody moved, nobody even breathed. The waiter, who had been hovering near the door, wisely stepped out and closed it tight. We were sealed in. Then the explosion happened. You ungrateful little... It was Jason. He lunged forward, slamming both fists onto the table. The wine glasses shook violently. Red wine spilled onto the white tablecloth, spreading like a blood stain. Jason! Mom screamed, but she didn't stop him. You think you're so special? Jason yelled. His face was twisted and ugly with rage. You think because you got on a magazine cover you can talk down to us? You're nothing. You were always a weird, quiet little freak. Dad should have kicked you out when you were 18. He did, I said calmly. I left the day after graduation because nobody asked me to stay. We fed you, Dad shouted. He was standing now, looming over the table. He pointed a shaking finger at me. We put clothes on your back. We paid for your college. I paid for my college, I corrected him. I had a full academic scholarship and I worked 3 jobs. You sent me a check for $500 once, freshman year. It bounced. You act like you were abused, Dad yelled. His face was so red I thought he might have a heart attack. We gave you a good life. We gave you a home in a nice neighborhood, a safe place to grow up. And this is how you repay us? By letting us drown? I'm not letting you drown, I said. You're already underwater. I'm just refusing to jump in with you. It's 1.5 million, Vivian, Tyler shouted. He looked like a child who had been told he couldn't have a toy. That's nothing to you. You're just being mean. You're doing this to punish us. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm making a business decision. The same way you made a business decision to skip my funding announcement. The same way you made a business decision to ignore my texts for 8 months. That's different, Mom wailed. She was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, ruining the last of her mascara. We were busy. We have lives. You can't hold a grudge forever, Vivian. It's not Christian. It's not right. It's not a grudge, I said. It's data. I've analyzed the data of our relationship, and the return on investment is 0. Oh, listen to her, Uncle Jeffrey sneered. He was drunk now, his words slurring together, using her big fancy words. Return on investment. You're cold, Vivian. You've always been cold, a block of ice. No wonder you don't have a husband. No man wants a woman who counts pennies like a miser. The insult was meant to sting. Years ago, it would have. Years ago, I would have cried. I would have apologized. I would have written the check just to make them stop yelling, just to make them love me for 5 minutes. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I sat there perfectly still, watching them self-destruct. They were trying everything. The guilt, the shame, the anger, the pity, every manipulation tactic in the book. Dad tried to play the victim. I'm an old man, Vivian. My heart isn't good. The stress of this, it could kill me. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to kill your father? Your heart is fine, Dad, I said. You played 18 holes of golf yesterday. I saw the scorecard on the club app. You shot an 86. Mom tried to play the martyr. I gave up everything for you children. I sacrificed my figure, I sacrificed my career, and now when I need just a little help, just a tiny bit of help, my own daughter turns her back on me. You had a nanny, Mom, I said, and a housekeeper who came 3 times a week. You didn't sacrifice anything. They kept going. It was a storm of noise. They called me selfish. They called me arrogant. They called me a traitor. They called me cold and heartless and ungrateful. I let them scream. I let them get it all out. I let them rage. Inside, I felt a strange sensation. I expected to feel hurt. I expected to feel sad, to feel guilty, to feel something. But instead, I felt lighter. Every insult they threw at me was cutting a cord. Snip, there went the need for their approval. Snip, there went the hope that they would change. Snip, there went the guilt I had carried for 30 years. I realized that they didn't see me. They had never seen me. To them, I was just a resource. When I was a child, I was an emotional resource, someone to ignore so they could feel important. Now I was a financial resource, someone to rob so they could stay comfortable. They were vampires, and I was finally closing the window. "Are you done?" I asked quietly. My voice was quiet, but it cut through their shouting like a knife through butter. They stopped. They were panting, out of breath, red-faced and sweating. The room was hot with their anger. "I said no," I stated clearly. "I am not loaning you the money. That is final." "Then get out," Dad growled. He sat back down heavily, like a puppet with cut strings. He couldn't even look at me. "Get out of my sight. You're no daughter of mine. If you walk out that door, don't ever come back. You're dead to us." "I've been dead to you for a long time, Dad," I said. "I just finally realized it." "Go," Jason shouted, pointing at the door. "Take your cheap car and your cheap clothes and get lost. We'll find the money somewhere else. We don't need you." "You won't find the money," I said. "No bank will touch you. No investor will touch you. I'm the only one who even looked at the books." "We'll find a way," Mom insisted. Her voice was shaking. "We always do. We're survivors." "You're not survivors," I said. "You're parasites." Mom gasped like I had slapped her. I stood up. I smoothed out my gray sweater. I picked up my purse. "I'm leaving," I said. "But before I go, there's one more thing." I looked at Alina. She had been standing like a statue through the entire screaming match. She hadn't flinched once. She was a professional. "Alina," I said, "show them the last document." Alina stepped forward without hesitation. She placed a single thick document on the center of the table. It made a heavy sound. Thud. The cover was blue. It had a legal seal on the front. "What is this?" Dad asked. He didn't touch it. He looked at it like it was a snake. "I told you I wouldn't give you a loan," I said. And that's true. A loan implies trust. A loan implies I believe you can pay me back. I don't. I walked around the table slowly, like a predator circling prey. "However," I continued, "I am a businesswoman. And when I see a distressed asset with potential, I act." "Distressed asset?" Jason asked. "What are you talking about?" "I knew about your financial trouble 3 weeks ago," I said. "My team monitors market opportunities. We saw the default notice from First National. We saw the filings from the Chicago lender." I stopped behind my father's chair. I didn't touch him. I just stood there. "I didn't come here to save you, Dad," I said quietly. "I came here to foreclose on you." "Foreclose?" Dad spun around in his chair. "You can't foreclose. You don't own the debt." "Actually," I said, "I do. Open it." Dad's hands were shaking so badly he could barely lift the cover. He read the first page. His eyes scanned the legal text. His face went from red to a terrifying shade of gray. This isn't possible," he whispered. "What?" Mom asked frantically. "Bob, what is it?" "She bought the note," Dad whispered. His voice was gone. He sounded like a ghost. "She bought the mortgage." "I bought your debt from the Chicago lender yesterday morning," I explained calmly. "They were happy to get rid of it. They thought you were going to default anyway. I paid them 80 cents on the dollar. It was a bargain, really." "And First National?" Dad asked, looking up at me with pure horror. "I acquired that debt this afternoon," I said. "Alina finalized the wire transfer while we were eating appetizers." I looked around the table at all of them. "I own the mortgage on this country club membership. I own the mortgage on the Miller Inn. I own the lien on the lake house. I own the debt on the company vehicles." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. Jason dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against his plate. You own everything?" Tyler asked. His voice was small and broken. "Everything," I said. "I am your creditor. I am the bank." I leaned in close to my father. "So when you tell me to get out and never come back, you might want to be careful, because technically you're sitting in a chair that I paid for." Dad slumped back. He looked defeated. All the bluster, all the anger, all the I am the patriarch energy drained out of him like water from a broken glass. He was just an old man who owed a lot of money to a woman he had underestimated. Why? Mom whispered. She looked terrified. Why would you do this? To ruin us? No, Mom, I said. To save the business. But not for you. For me. I signaled Alina again. She pulled more papers from her briefcase. These are the terms, I said. Since you're in default on both loans, I have the right to seize the assets immediately. I could kick you out of the house tonight. I could lock the doors of the motel tomorrow morning. Mom let out a whimper. But, I said, I'm not cruel. I'm not you. I slid a check across the table. It was face down. I am taking over full ownership of Miller Hospitality Group effective immediately, I said. The board is dissolved. The executive positions are terminated. I looked at Jason. You're fired. I looked at Dad. You're retired. You can't just... Jason started, but he stopped. He knew I could. The check on the table, I said, is a severance package. It's $200,000. That's for your equity. It's more than the business is worth considering the debt. Take it and you walk away clean. No debt, no lawsuits, no bankruptcy. 200,000, Dad said weakly. But the land alone... The land is leveraged to the hilt, Dad, I said. You own nothing. This is a gift. It's the last gift I will ever give you. And if we refuse? Uncle Jeffrey asked. Then I foreclose tomorrow, I said simply. I take the assets through the courts. You get nothing. You go bankrupt. You lose the house. You lose the cars. You lose the reputation you care so much about. Everyone at the club will know Robert Miller couldn't pay his bills. I let the threat hang there. I knew that was the one thing they couldn't handle. They could handle losing money. They couldn't handle losing face. You have 5 minutes to sign, I said. I checked my watch, the cheap, simple watch on my wrist. The clock starts now. I walked over to the window and looked out at the golf course. It was dark outside. The course was lit by soft lights. I could see my reflection in the glass. I looked calm. I looked strong. Behind me, I heard the sounds of my family falling apart. I heard Mom crying softly. I heard Jason cursing under his breath. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. They were signing their empire over to the daughter they forgot. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see it. I already knew how this story ended. The pen stopped scratching. There was silence. I turned back from the window. My father was holding the pen in his shaking hand. He looked up at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes. There was only desperation. Vivian, he croaked, please, the legacy, the Miller name. The name is safe, Dad, I said coldly. I'm keeping the name. I'm just changing the management. He looked at my mother. She was staring at the tablecloth, weeping silently. She gave him a tiny, almost invisible nod. She knew. She knew the game was over. If they didn't sign, they would face the humiliation of a public foreclosure. They would be dragged through the courts. Their friends at the club would read about their bankruptcy in the paper. For people like my parents, poverty is scary, but embarrassment is fatal. Dad looked back at the paper. He pressed the pen down. He signed his name, Robert Miller. It was a messy scrawl, barely legible. It looked like surrender. He pushed the paper away from him like it was contaminated. He dropped the pen. It's done, he whispered. Alina stepped forward immediately. She checked the signature. She stamped the document with an official seal. She placed a copy of the countersigned agreement on the table. Thank you, Alina said. Her voice was completely devoid of emotion. The transfer of ownership is legally binding as of this moment. I walked back to the table. I picked up the check, the $200,000 severance. I held it out to my father. Here, I said. He didn't take it. He just stared at his hands. Jason snatched it. He looked at the number. Greed warred with panic in his eyes. 200 grand, Jason muttered. That's 50 each. That's nothing. That won't even buy a condo. It's 200,000 more than you had 5 minutes ago, I said. And Jason, I added. He looked up at me. You need to return the Porsche keys tonight. What? Jason stood up, his face turning pale. No. No way. I need my car. How am I supposed to get home? Take an Uber, I said. The Porsche is a company vehicle. The company belongs to me, and I don't let former employees drive company assets. You can't do this, Tyler whined. What about my allowance? What about the trust fund? The trust fund was invested in the motel chain, Tyler, I said. Dad drained it 5 years ago to pay for roof repairs. Didn't he tell you? Tyler looked at Dad with horror. You spent my money? Dad didn't answer. He was slumped in his chair, staring at nothing. And the house? Mom asked. Her voice was trembling. Vivian, surely you won't take the house. Where will we live? I looked at my mother. I remembered the way she looked at me when I was a child, like I was a stain on her perfect carpet. The house is collateral on the First National loan, I said. It belongs to the bank, and now I am the bank. I paused. I'm giving you 30 days. That's generous. Most banks would give you 10. You have 30 days to vacate the property. I suggest you use the severance money to find a rental. Maybe something cozy. A rental? Mom gasped. She clutched her pearls. I can't live in a rental. What will the girls say? Tell them you're downsizing, I suggested. Or tell them the truth, that you spent decades pretending to be rich while neglecting the actual business. Uncle Jeffrey, who had been silent since the threat of bankruptcy, suddenly stood up. He swayed a little, drunk and angry. You're a monster, he spat at me. A cold-hearted monster. Family is supposed to stick together. What happened to loyalty? Loyalty is a two-way street, Uncle Jeffrey, I said. You were loyal to the money, not to me. I looked at them all one last time. Dad, defeated and broken. Mom, terrified of her social standing collapsing. Jason and Tyler, realizing they would actually have to work for a living. Uncle Jeffrey, a drunk old man with nothing left to leech off. I waited for the sadness to hit me. I waited to feel bad for them. But the sadness didn't come. Instead, I felt a massive weight lift off my chest. It was a physical sensation. My shoulders dropped, my lungs expanded. I could breathe. I realized that for my entire life, I had been carrying their expectations. I had been carrying their judgments. I had been trying to fill a bucket that had a hole in the bottom. Now I put the bucket down. Alina, I said, handle the keys. Yes, ma'am, Alina said. She held out her hand to Jason. Jason looked at me, then at Alina. He cursed under his breath. He dug into his pocket and slammed the Porsche keys into Alina's hand. I hope you choke on it, Jason said to me. I won't, I said. I have a very good digestion. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the heavy wooden doors. Vivian, Dad called out. His voice was weak, cracking. Vivian, wait. I stopped. My hand was on the brass handle. What? I asked without turning around. We did love you, he said. In our own way. I stood there for a second. I thought about the empty chairs at my celebration dinner. I thought about the text message asking for money. I thought about the silence. No, Dad, I said softly to the door. You loved having a daughter you could ignore until she became useful. That isn't love. That's ownership. I pushed the door open. And I'm not for sale anymore. I walked out of the gold room. The door clicked shut behind me with a solid final sound. It sounded like the closing of a vault, like the ending of a chapter. I walked through the lobby of the country club. It was quiet. The dinner rush was over. A few people were sitting in the lounge, drinking brandy and talking about golf scores and stock portfolios. They looked up as I walked past. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know that the woman in the gray sweater and old shoes had just bought their club's biggest debt. They saw a nobody. I smiled. I liked being a nobody to them. It meant I was free. I walked out the front doors into the night air. It was cool and crisp. The sky was clear. I could see the stars, thousands of them, more than you can usually see in the city. Inside that room, the air had been hot and suffocating, filled with lies and perfume and desperation. Out here, the air was clean. I took a deep breath. It tasted like freedom. I walked down the stone steps to the parking lot. The valet saw me coming. He looked at my ticket. He frowned, remembering my car. "The sedan?" he asked, wrinkling his nose like it smelled bad. "Yes," I said. "The sedan." He jogged off to get it, probably annoyed he had to touch it. While I waited, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was a text message. It had come through 2 minutes ago. It was from Mom. "Vivi, please, let's talk about this. Don't do this to us. I can fix this. I'll make Dad apologize. Just come back inside. We can work something out. You're my baby girl." I stared at the words. Baby girl. She only used that term when she wanted to manipulate me. She was still trying. Even now, after everything, after the contracts were signed and the deal was done, she thought she could pull the string and I would dance. She thought I was still that desperate little girl waiting for approval. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. I tapped the 3 dots in the corner of the screen. I selected block caller. Then I went to Dad's contact. Block. Jason. Block. Tyler. Block. Uncle Jeffrey. Block. I watched the names disappear from my active list one by one. It was digital surgery. I was cutting out the infection. The valet pulled up in my 2016 sedan. The engine rattled. The brakes squeaked as he stopped. It looked ridiculous parked next to the Mercedes and BMWs lined up like soldiers. The valet got out and held the door open. He looked like he expected a tip, but he also looked like he judged me for driving junk. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a $100 bill. I handed it to him. "Keep the change," I said. His eyes went wide. "Thank you, ma'am." I got into the car. The seat was worn. The steering wheel was peeling a little. It was imperfect. It was old, but it was mine. I bought it with my own money. I paid for the gas. I paid for the insurance. I didn't owe anyone a single cent for this car. I started the engine. It roared to life, coughing a little before settling into a steady rhythm. I drove down the long, winding driveway, past the perfect flower beds, past the manicured lawns, past the security gate. I turned onto the main road. I rolled down the windows. I let the wind whip my hair around my face. It felt wild and free. I thought about what I was leaving behind. I was leaving behind a family legacy that was built on lies. I was leaving behind the need to be good enough for people who were never good enough for me. I was leaving behind the shame of being the black sheep, the disappointment, the forgotten one. I thought about what was ahead of me. My company, my employees who respected me, my own home that I paid for, my future that I was building brick by brick. I realized that revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. It isn't about screaming or fighting or making them suffer. Real revenge is just being happy without them. Real revenge is realizing you don't need them. Real revenge is becoming so whole, so complete, so self-sufficient that they simply cease to matter. They were footnotes now, just small, sad scribbles at the bottom of the page of my life. I turned up the radio. A song I liked was playing. I started to hum along, then sing along, getting louder with each word. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The lights of the country club were fading into the distance. They were just tiny specks of light in the dark, getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. Then I turned my eyes back to the road ahead. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the path forward. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the invisible daughter. I wasn't the backup plan. I was Vivian. And for the first time in my life, I was driving my own car, on my own road, going exactly where I wanted to go. Nobody could stop me now.